within the group, and those would be Roberta Dohse, who was in the anthology. And so everybody could just say a hello to Roberta Dohse.
Hello.
Hello.
And then also Patty, who's you're seeing right now is Patty Alaniz, who was in the anthology. We're very glad to have you
Thank you.
with us. I think Patty and I don't remember how we became Facebook friends, but I do go out there on Facebook a lot, and I'm always looking for interesting things. So, and we met, and I encouraged her to submit to the anthology, and very glad to have you in it, and very glad to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
So I guess it's a little past 7. I think we don't have Robin Carstensen yet, I don't think. And
Actually,
She's there.
oh, there's my daughter. That's our daughter, Alexis.
hi.
And she's the tech on a lot of this stuff. And I just take the opportunity, if you could go back to me for a second, Alex, you're doing the spotlight.
No.
Oh, well, if you could, somebody is maybe spotlighting you. Okay, I just want to go back. Alexis does our covers for all of our books. This is from the last anthology, which Alexis did. So we're very happy that she works with us, and she'll be doing the tech tonight. So I guess we can wait a couple of more minutes. Has anyone heard from Robin?
I'm right here.
Oh, you're there, Robin. Okay. 4 out. Okay, that's great. So let's just go ahead and get started then, I guess. I'm Bill Mays. I think most of you know me, the publisher and the editor of the Corpus Christi Writers series. It's a yearly. We've had 3 of them out. We'll have a 4th one out in the fall. The submissions, we're open for submissions right now. So if you want to submit, that would be great. I think most of you have my email address. You can also go to our website, mayspublishing.com. The anthology is, we have poetry, prose, fiction, nonfiction, visual poetry. We really are interested in maybe doing more in this anthology with visual content. So we're very open to suggestions about what people would like to have. You can, like I say, you can go to our website, mayspublishing.com, and you can, and if you get a little time, you can look around the website. There's a lot of content there, and even if you're not from Corpus Christi, we'll put your work on the website, and we'll give you a little bio, which will have a link to your buy pages, your websites. So we're trying to develop the website as an online literary magazine that can be used to promote the works of writers. So I guess since we have Robin, let's go ahead and start. And Robin is going to read When I Swam with Dolphins.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Hi, everybody. And thank you, Bill, for having me on this panel. And it's been a great festival, extraordinary festival. This is, When I Swam with Dolphins. I never thought of wading neck deep past the 3rd sandbar, surrendering shame. I leapt with the whole length of our bodies, reached across the sun-drop hatchlings, buoyed in the bays, heard love calling, her sluicing cosmos thrust, release, her whistling beams resounding past breaches, as if I never feared, had never doubted.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you very much. I love this poem. I love the local flavor to it about swimming out there, which I love to see that stuff in the anthology. So I guess the first question, and just to anyone really, what is poetry? How would each of you define what poetry is? Go ahead, Robin.
Oh, this was a chance. I mean, it's such a huge question because certainly we've been looking at such wonderful examples of poetry that's filled with language and lyricism, both in words and in different kinds of forms that are not words, the mixed media, intermediate forms also. But I mean, for this form, it's taking a leap into the inexpressible. I'll let others. So taking leaps into the non-linear, non-logical, trying to find ways to discover, that the poetry is a way to express the inexpressible.
Mhm.
That's great. Does anyone else have a thought on that?
You're able to express your feelings.
You express your feelings?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
feelings of others also. That's what I do in my poems. I usually try to see what other people are going through, and I express their thoughts and stuff through my poems.
Okay, no, that's great. That's great. That's great. Let's go on to and we can come back to this topic, but let's go on to Alan, and he's going to read Blue Collar Heaven.
I don't know if I'm supposed to wait to when I pop up, Bill, or you want me to start?
Well, it'll generally follow you when you start talking. So just go ahead.
Okay. The Blue Collar Heaven. My father never got a paid day off. No sick days, no holidays, not even Christmas. So he worked on every eve and birthday, dragged himself to work with fevers and stitches, often over my mother's protest, because the goddamn bills wouldn't pay themselves. His tin knocker union had a healthy strike fund, so he never voted to ratify a single contract, no matter how reasonable the terms, no matter if Jesus Christ himself returned to Utica as a union boss and preached on the value of ratification. My old man's mind would have remained unchanged, even if he knew his thumbs down would place his back pew Catholic soul in peril, because nothing he could imagine came closer to paradise than sitting on a cheap lawn chair in his backyard on a weekday afternoon while nursing a cold brew and watching his grass grow, all the while knowing that a fat check from the union sat in his bank account answering his most basic of prayers.
Thank you, Alan. I love that poem. And I kind of wanted to return to the issue of what is poetry. We used to, and I think poetry used to be kind of the story of kings and, great war leaders. But now increasingly all of literature has kind of gone small. And I don't, there's a whole history of that. But how do you feel about that, Alan? And your work in particular are these very granular kind of things. So how do you feel about that, Alan?
Well, I know, like when I was in college and then in graduate school, that would have been in the 70s and very early 80s. I felt the same way, like what you were saying, Bill. But uh, when I hit graduate school and I started writing my poems, a friend of mine, Rick Sale, gave me a book he had published by B.H. Fairchild. And Fairchild wrote only a lot about his blue collar upbringing as a pipe fitter. Matter of fact, the only reason he became a PhD in English is because his father's pipe fitting business went out of business, and he had to find something else to do. But when I found that and found out that, yeah, you can write poetry about the blue collar experience, it kind of freed me up to do it. I've been doing it ever since. And there have been other blue collar poets besides B.H. Fairchild, but he was just the one who influenced me the most. But I think when we write, we're writing about the human experience, and you don't have to come from a particular class to have that experience. So I'm uh, so yeah, and in a lot of ways, we write to we write to preserve as well. And I think a lot of that life is fading away. I know my father's generation is just about all gone. Hell, my generation is getting to be the point where it's old enough to start disappearing. So it's another reason I write about those guys.
Okay, to go on to kind of, did anyone else have any thoughts about that, about how literature in general and perhaps poetry specifically is kind of gotten smaller and deals with smaller themes, which are then universal themes? Does anyone else have any follow-up thoughts on what Alan was saying?
Well, if I could add to that, and also taking off of what Robin was saying, the idea of expressing or trying to express the inexpressible, that's a very Platonic idea. I'm sure a lot of us know that that's a Platonic idea, but right after that came Aristotle, who was very caught up in empiricism. And let me be honest and say, I did not lose power. I didn't lose water this past week. I didn't lose internet. So I was very fortunate, but I spent the whole week writing a long, unnecessary essay to one of my professors, sort of getting after him for making a the Platonic point of view out as being sort of a pie in the sky sort of approach to knowledge, because we do live in a society that privileges science and the idea of scientific knowledge and empiricism, when neuroscience is sort of now at a time where we have to understand that objectivity is a myth, as it turns out, because there's so much that happens in the brain that first of all, there's a lot that we just don't know about, but second of all, we could more easily empirically say that objectivity doesn't exist than we can say that there is an absolute world out there that we're all seeing the same parts of, if that makes sense. But I really do think that poetry and what artists do is, like what Alan said, preservation, but also just the most pure form of study that you can do as a feeble human. I say it all the time, but I say it with respect, and just take up that that humility that you can have, that makes you so free and able to express yourself and not feel like, well, this is a useless enterprise. I hope that makes sense there.
That's great, Zoe. Thanks so much for the comment. We had Roberta and Javier come in with some comments in the chat window. And if Roberta, if you could share your thoughts with us.
Oh, for me, I just think that you can really just capture a moment in time, something that you see, something impresses you, or a memory, and sometimes it's very fleeting.
That's very cool. And that, I think definitely Alan's poem was like that. It kind of captured a moment or a series of moments. And from that, there's some universality. Javier also made the point, and if you could, in the chat, could you kind of elaborate on what you were saying, Javier?
Yes, Bill. I think we need to redefine the definition of poetry from the traditional view to an open expression that keeps changing on a daily basis. If we can have a blank canvas as a work of art, we can also have a blank page as a poem itself. Poetry now incorporates sound, film, fonts, lettering. It encompasses many expressions that do not fit in within the traditional view of poetry.
Thank you, Javier. Great points. And I do want to move on in a second to Karen, but I wanted to bring one other idea about poetry which I'm afraid I'll forget it if I don't bring it in. And that is that you would normally have a sentence, you would say, I went down to the grocery store. But in poems, it's quite common to break the sentence where they'll say, I went down, then they'll break it and they'll put to the grocery store on the next line. And what it seems to me is happening is that the poet is trying to make you aware that you're looking at squiggles, black lines on a piece of paper. How do y'all feel about that?
Well, one of the,
Well,
go ahead.
I just kind of wanted to that end, build on what Javier was saying. In an earlier panel, Octavio Quintanilla was presenting his frontextos, and he was talking about how even though he's drawing and it's lines and it's scribbles on a paper, and it's the image, but he doesn't see it art, he sees it as poetry because of the lines. And I thought that was really an interesting take, and it really does expand what is poetry.
That's a very good point. His work is really stunning. You know, I see his stuff on Facebook. It's really stunning stuff. So thank you for, and as long as you're up, Karen, why don't you, let's go ahead and go to you, and you can read your poem, Standing in Line.
Okay. We're all standing in line for something. Back when I was a kid and Carter was running the show, we had to stand in line for that cheese. Our cars lined up and down the block waiting on that 17-cent gasoline. Well, Nancy and Ronnie took over and told us, just say no. But we were standing on the corner waiting in a line for someone to bring us that new cheese for a little cheddar. Cue the Gulf War, and we're standing in line at the recruiter's office, ready to get our patriotism on and show the world who the boss is, make our medals to hang on the wall until we need them to stand in line for the parades. Well, Hope and Change got us standing in the unemployment line, waiting for our checks to clear from Uncle Sam, and all the lines to the rallies are filled with despair instead. But now we're on the sidelines. The only lines are for concerts and iPhones full of politically correct amusement to keep us entertained, and out of the lines outside of Congress and the Senate, because brother, you got to pay to get in that line.
Thank you, Karen. That's a great poem. It always kind of reminds me of like a Woody Guthrie folk song, or kind of a protest song that would have been out in the 60s or the 70s, which kind of brings us to another point that's always kind of fascinated me. And you know, I guess to me, I always thought, and I always liked poetry, but to me, it was always something in a book. You know, you're reading this thing, but then I started hanging out with some of you folks, and I would go out to these readings, and it was kind of a different thing. And I got kind of the feeling that I was part of something that had been going on long, like thousands of years. Because if you're talking about TVs and movies, those are very recent innovations. Likewise, novels really are dependent on the printing press. And then even if you look at plays, those are kind of an outgrowth of large scale civilizations like those. I think those first kind of appeared during the Greek times. But people standing up there and reciting something orally is thousands, maybe 10,000 years old. And the interesting thing to me is that when that stuff started, it was more about disseminating the values of the culture. It was like reinforce, these are our values and this is what we stand for. But now poetry has kind of shifted a little bit, and it tends to be protest a little more. And any thoughts of any of y'all have on that would be great. Karen, go ahead if you want.
I don't know. I think that, okay, shameless plug. We went through insurrection, and immediately my publishing company said, well, we're going to open a space. So for 2 days, we had people that were protesting what they were seeing in front of their eyes. They were feeling, and they had a visceral response, and they had to share that, you know, and since then we put out an entire anthology just based on one day. And you know what happened on January the 6th, And I think that not only do we have an opportunity, but we have a responsibility to protest what's going on in the world. So that's it.
But on the same token, you're expressing your values of society. So it hasn't changed because our values are the same. It's what's happened out there that's different.
You're saying the values haven't changed, but you're still trying to uphold the values that you think are more appropriate.
Yeah, and the poet is kind of in this role, the poet is like the prophet and speaks truth to power.
Oh, that's cool. I hadn't thought of it that way. Now, Robin Carstensen, when we were first talking about doing this set of questions, had sent me some information, and she was talking about how it offers a portal into complex subjects and questions, erased and marginalized histories and voices, which unfold across a diverse spectrum of both restrained or understated political commentary. So if you could, Robin, if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, wow. I must have been in I don't know, an intelligent state of mind at the time when I wrote that. I don't know. It sounds, well, what did I say? A portal into what? Can you repeat that? A portal into.
It was great now. A portal into complex subjects and questions, erased, marginalized histories and voices, which unfold across, oh, wait, I lost it, which unfold across a diverse spectrum of both restrained or understated political commentary and polemics. Very cool.
Well, I was thinking when you were saying suddenly, well, right now, I guess I can connect that to what you were saying about how it suddenly seems there's this burgeoning, I don't know, some political poetry, but I think over the course of, written, recorded history on cave walls and hieroglyphics and the Aztecs, and there's has been the storytelling, right? And the storytelling includes storytelling of resistance against colonizers, storytelling of protest. And it came to my mind like William Blake and his poems, the Chimney Sweep and the Schoolboy and the Songs of Experience song. These are poems of resistance and protest against early capitalism and exploitation of of laborers, and just so you can go throughout history and look at poems of protest and poems of resistance. And I don't want to take over the conversation, so maybe somebody else can jump in with a little bit of that. Or
Let's see. Karen mentions The Lost Leader by Robert Browning in the chat window.
Well, if you, I don't mind if I'm not able to show anything tonight, but I did want to add that I feel like it's a kind of important to be on the other side of poetry. When it comes to being the writer, you sort of develop an understanding that what you write, I mean, it's not you that you're writing about, even if it seems like you are the narrator. And so most of the time, the subject matter really just finds me. I mean, because I know that I write a lot of, I guess, angry sounding poetry, but it's just because I feel like that's what an audience needs to hear, and it's an ethical decision. Because I'm writing to the world. It's not because, internally I feel all these things in an absolutely denotative fashion, that these are all the things I feel, but it's just kind of what you need to say to react. And so I don't feel like I have much of a choice when it comes to what I feel needs to be said.
That's great, Zoe. Thank you so much for those comments. Let's move on to Juan now, who's going to read I Am Juan in the Fields.
Thank you. Give me just.
And if we could remove the spotlights and let Juan have full screen.
So I don't know anything about this protest poetry, but this is a poem that I wrote about my 8-year-old self, who went on to into 12th grade, doing the same thing, working in onion fields, which my dad went to 5th grade twice. Second year he was out, my mom the third, and I personally learned English in 2nd grade. So all this is about those people like me at the time, even though I was born here in the United States, working on those fields alongside those that don't have papers, as we call it. So I am Juan in the fields. I am Juan. I have been born to privilege, working many migrant fields with my poorly educated parents who allowed me to complete mine. I am Juan. My belly is full of bean and tortillas, fresh early in the summer morning in the sea of an undocumented brown people. I am Juan. My ears are rich with the sounds of grunts and groans of the onion cutting scissors, bleeding sweet its sour juices. I am Juan. My body constantly cool with my precious Mexican sweat, taking a break to talk to the onions, telling them to make a great feast of themselves. I am Juan. I am Juan of the free. I am Juan of the educated. I am Juan of the privileged. I am Juan in the onion fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. That's a great poem. Very visceral. It really gets to you. Did anyone else have any thoughts about political commentary before we move on?
Yeah, this is Odelia. I was going to say that I think about it as poetry of witness. It's like we witness things that are happening in our society and we want to write about them. And so that's one type of poetry that I write, but I also write what I call channeled poetry. Like sometimes I read them and I go, I don't even remember writing that poem. So I have to be really careful and make sure that I write my name on them, because sometimes I think, well, maybe they belong to some of my students in a workshop or something. But so I think as writers, we probably write different types of poetry. And I think another type of poetry that I write is one where I intentionally want to write about something. And so then and those are a little bit more difficult for me than poetry of witness or channeled poetry. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the comment. That's great. I really appreciate that. We all do. We're gonna shift gears a little bit now, and to Tom Murphy reading Obituary, which is another poem that I've always loved. So our new poet laureate, Tom Murphy.
Did Tom disappear? I believe Tom disappeared, Bill.
Okay. Then.
Yeah, let's move on to the next, and
we'll go on to Javier, reading his poetry in Spanish.
Good night, everybody. I just want to thank Bill and his team for giving me a chance to publish this poem. If you have the anthology, you can find the English version on the following page, right? My mother has been a source of inspiration since she first started showing signs of dementia. And this is one of the last poems that I wrote about her. The title of the poem is Celebración, Celebration. Madre, celebro cada remanso de luz que asoma entre la densa niebla de tus ojos. Cuando tus manos perciben mi luz, resplandece una flor en tu rostro. A veces ilumino tus sombras, hilvano tus sueños, silencio tus murmullos, enjuago de tus ojos el polvo de la noche. Pero una y otra vez desmaya el remanso, entre conchas, piedras y arena. Madre, dame tus manos, acuna mi rostro, repite mi nombre. Toma las mías, madre, escucha el arrullo infantil que te llama. Elvita, escucha mi voz, como agua que vuelve a su cauce. Toma su luz para volver hasta mí. Gracias. Thank you.
And thank you, Javier, which I think now leads into another issue, which you had a whole panel in this festival on poetry and translation. And I think, which is great, and it kind of, there's special issues in South Texas, which are great, the use of the Spanish language. And I think in general, though, you see a lot of poetry that uses, will reference foreign words. It's pretty common, it seems to me, and that just kind of plays into the notion of poetry really is about exploring what language is all about. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
One of the discussions that we've had in another workshop was when to italicize foreign words, or in my case, Spanish words. And after much thought, I arrive at the conclusion that I tend to italicize my words in Spanish because my experience in that language is mostly in Spanish and not a fusion between English and Spanish. As opposed to someone who would have been raised here in Texas and their linguistic experience is both English and Spanish. Mine was 15 years of Spanish and then the rest in English, and then English and Spanish. The other reason I also italicize words in Spanish is when it's generational. When I think about my father who did not speak Spanish, or my great-grandparents that did not speak English, I tend to, or I want to italicize those Spanish words to identify their own character and individuality. But then that is my experience, so I don't know how else, who's, the experience.
We lost Javier's audio. Some of it is the sound. I love I love hearing Javier read this. He did read this for the literary reading series, and we got a video of it, and I put it on our YouTube because I just think it sounds neat, and I think maybe some of that with some of these is like that. I wanted to mention just quickly, and it's a bit of a diversion, but I'm a big fan of Cormac McCarthy, who wrote All the Pretty Horses and other books. And I think it's in All the Pretty Horses, there's pages of Spanish and there's really no translation or anything going on, but you just kind of flow with the language and you have a sense of what's going on and what the action is. So anyway, I love your work, Javier. I think that's really good. Does anyone else have any thoughts about? I think Tom Murphy also uses in some of your, like that Woof and Warp. I think you use some foreign language, and I know that Joshua Hamilton incorporates a lot of Spanish. So if any of y'all have any thoughts on that, if you feel like jumping in.
Did. I do. Odelia again. I want to thank Javier for his beautiful poem. And I think that if we weren't we weren't an English only attitude country, we'd hear a lot more of different languages beautiful languages being spoken in the US. Like if you travel to other countries like in Europe or other places, you hear all these rich languages. And like when I lived in Brazil, I was able to read poetry in Portuguese. And so I think that that we need to encourage people's voices and to be able to write in whatever language they feel comfortable writing in, and not say you have to submit a translation. I'm an editor for Anaqua Literary Arts Journal, and I published some poems that were just in Spanish, and I didn't ask the person to send in a translation because I don't think that we have to do that anymore. And I loved what you said, Javier, about the italics, because I feel the same way. When I was editing Francisco Alarcon's book, Snake Poems, An Aztec Invocation, I wasn't translating it. When I was editing that book for the 25th anniversary of it, we went back and forth, myself and the translators, as to whether or not we should italicize the Nahuatl or italicize the Spanish. And we decided, that because we wanted to set it apart, and we felt that it was set apart in a good way, not in a, like the way that we used to think about it. So that's all I want to say about that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Is it Odelia? Thank you so much. Thank you. I wanted to do a quick shout out here. I see Joshua Espedia there. He's been in a couple of our anthologies, and I've never met you in person. So I'm so glad to see you joining us tonight. I just wanted to say hi to you. So anyway, I think we have Tom Murphy back with us now, and we're going to shift gears a little bit. And he's going to read Obituary, which is, I love this poem. These are all, everybody has great poems. Obituary is a great poem. So Tom Murphy, our poet laureate, or our current poet laureate, or incoming, I guess it's incoming.
Obituary. In this godforsaken Bible Rust Belt, Margaret Screws lived 98 years before going to the Lord on November 19, 2016 at Mount Carmel, CC. A dedicated nurse who learned her asses and lube trade in the same hospital where she was born, in St. Paul's and Big D, as Margaret Ann Thurman. Moved to Kermit with her friend Janie to nurse that West Texas Big Sky at Robinson McClure Hospital, where she gave a shot of penicillin to her love, George Dewey Pete Screws. Humble Margaret Screws, Pete Fitzwillie, and pops out 8 children before a Sun Oil company shipped them off to San Ysidro Sun Oil Field. A school nurse, then a quick in and out, the Kingsville Records headline, Margaret Screws Bishop, now Screws in Paramount. Nurse of Brock County, humble but proud. Oh, St. Teresa, the Infinite Flower Catholic Church of Fremont. How do we know Margaret Screws? The 8 kids, 19 grandchildren, their 39 great-grandchildren, and their 3 great-great-grandchildren. Her boys weren't all that proud or humble. After childhood torment, teasing, and torture, 2 of the sons changed their name to Cruz. The 5 girls all married, thus taking their husband's name, except for David Screws in Stephenville. Remember, when you're pressing that button, while you're lying in your hospital bed, mainlining meds and saline solution, plus filling up that colostomy bag, remember, oh nurse, Margaret Screws.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Sure.
I think this was in the 2018 Corpus Christi Writers Anthology, and I remember we got the proof back. It was the first time I'd ever seen the book itself. We got the proof back, and I set it on our kitchen table, and it fell open to Obituary, and we read that. I read that aloud to my wife and to our son, and we all got a big kick out of it. So, how did you come to write this? Could you?
It was a total found poem. I read the paper and I read the obituaries. When I saw that name, it was just like, I have to write a poem about this. You know, that name is so unique, and all. And so it was just kind of like, I kept it for a while, and then I wrote it out. But I used the information from the obituary about all the names, and I just, added some things. I actually added in a little bit from, there's a punk band called Killer Pussy, was the name of the punk band. And they had a song called Teenage Enema Nurses in Bondage. And so I had used that song in a class because it's mentioned in a book. And so I kind of took some of that idea into her nursing profession there and everything. And so that was it. And I just kind of thought it was interesting that the fact that two of the sons had changed their names, but only one of them didn't. And it had to be because they got harassed with kids and things. So that's how I took form, really.
Thank you, Tom, for sharing that. And then this is also kind of maybe a broader discussion that a lot of the poets in this group, and I think everywhere, the work is pretty funny. There's just a lot of humor, and I know Alan's work, a lot of that is pretty humorous. And I think there was even maybe one of your poetry panels was poetry as stand-up comedy, not this year, but maybe in years past. I think so. Any thoughts y'all have about that?
Well, Alan did the poetry on humor a few years ago. That was good. I think his and Juan's poems could be the funniest poems. Have some really good funny poems there. I love Juan's poem about the food and talking about what he wants to do in a relationship with, and he uses food that way. It's a really hilarious poem. But Alan and him really are masterful at it. This was just probably one of my few funny poems, really, honestly.
I'm glad you wrote it, and I certainly enjoyed reading it, and I enjoyed listening to you read it. It's very nice. Let's see, where are we going from here? Let's go on to Patty Alaniz to kind of reintroduce everyone to Patty. Patty and I never met in person. I go through Facebook. I do a lot on social media, and somehow or other, Patty Alaniz and I became Facebook friends. And she writes poetry, and so I encouraged her to submit to the anthology, and she did. And would you like to share a little bit of your personal story, Patty, that you write? Why do you write poetry? And how did you get into writing it? You've got to unmute, Patty.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Writing when I was in high school, I had an English teacher that I had for 2 years that kind of inspired me to write. And I always liked poetry since I was a little girl, but I guess that's when I started writing, was when I was out of sophomore school, and then kept writing till I got to college, and I joined a poetry club there where one of the guys in the club didn't like my poems, and just told me what I was writing wasn't poetry. So I gave up poetry then and threw away most of my poems. And but a couple of years ago, I started writing again, and finally got brave and put one of my poems on Facebook, and I started getting people to like my poems, and so that kind of lifted my spirits, and I started writing again.
That's a great story, Patty. Why don't you go ahead and read a little bit of the poem for us, if you would? I think we lost Patty. Okay. We'll try to get Patty back later. For now, let's go on to Roberta
Okay.
Dohse. Roberta, are you there? Yes, Roberta said, go ahead and unmute Roberta.
I can't, there, got it?
There you go. And let me just introduce you a little bit. Roberta, I think, has been in all 3 of our anthologies, and very much like her work. While so many of the works of the local poets is not what you think of as flowery poetry or love poetry, Roberta's is. A lot of it is about love or love lost, and I've always liked it. I found it very evocative. So I'm glad that you have submitted and been in the anthologies. And, you know, if you could read for us, I really like your work. And thank you for joining us too.
Oh, thank you. I don't think this is flowery, but
Okay.
it's called Bittersweet.
Okay.
The old tree where you first pulled down a branch to pluck me a sweet blossom, where you first gazed so deeply into my eyes, it is leaning so wearily into the wind. The old gas pump is still standing at the edge of town, though the station is now long abandoned. It was there you first put your hands on my shoulders and drew me close, just to smell my hair. And up the hill is the old barn where we had our first dance, swaying so slowly to the rhythm of the band. I still remember the deep, musky smell of you. There is music. And despite my best intentions, I am drawn in to gaze at the big dance floor, at the band at the far end up on the stage, just getting started. People filter in to sit at the rough wooden tables, laughing, talking, and I lose myself in the lively tunes. I can almost taste the beer. A smile steals across my lips. Then a loud commotion erupts at the door and you burst in, your bigger than life laugh filling the space. You move through, greeting old friends, eyes sparkling, legs twitching with pulsing rhythm. The very air has come alive. But you are not with me, and the tears spill unbidden from my eyes. I stifle my sobs, fade back into the shadows, then out into the twilight. Still, I cannot keep from looking back as I drift slowly down the hill, and like Lot's wife, I am rooted to the spot. The last rays of the setting sun arc through the gaps in the walls, through the places where the roof has crumbled, where moss and leaves have tumbled in, and with a great flutter of wings, a covey of birds bursts out into the cooling air.
Thank you so much, Roberta. I love your work. I really do. There's at one point, which I don't remember which anthology it was, that was called Montevideo.
Yeah.
Which I think that's my favorite poem of yours, but so much of your work is like what you just read that I thought, you know, I'd rather see that one in this thing tonight. So anyway, I'm glad that you joined us. Glad to have you with us. Or Patty, can you hear me, Patty? Try to unmute.
Yes.
Okay, now let's try reading the poem.
Okay. This is called Portrayed by Fear. There she stood, so all alone, wishing she was made of stone. Her skin so pale, her bones are frail. Her fate is doomed. Will she prevail? Her eyes glaze dim in darkness found. A silence echoes all around. She roams alone a darkened road. Her innocence somebody stowed. She wallows in her sleep at night. Portrayed by fear, has lost her sight. Poor soul so scorned, she rather die. I pray she tries to find the light, but darkness pulls her in some more, so much more deeper than before. It stings her heart, it steals her soul. Poor precious one, a heavy toll. Will she be saved? Nobody knows. It pulls her down out of control with limbs of lies and roots of hate. It quivers her and takes her fate with howling words of hurricanes. Poor soul has slowly gone insane. Will she be lost to this domain with nothing but a grave to gain? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patty. Thank you for being my Facebook friend, and thank you for participating in the anthology, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm sure that I echo everyone's sentiment to keep writing. Don't be discouraged. You know,
Thank you.
It's just great work, and you know, very happy to have you here.
It's been an honor.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to Joshua Hamilton. And again, we're going to change direction with our last two folks. which would be Joshua Hamilton and Zoe Ramos, because they're kind of into more visual poetry and that kind of thing. Although they both write what you would call more traditional work. But we'll go to Joshua Hamilton first.
All right, thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for all this work that you've done with the Corpus Christi Writers Anthology and giving a place for all this great writing to actually find a corporal material hard copy home. That's fantastic, for sure. So thanks so much for all that. I'm going to read from the anthology. I'm going to read a poem called Stall Turn. And I'll give a little context. I usually try to avoid doing this, but I used to live in the Ohio Valley in a place called Madison, Indiana for quite a while. And we have one of those high-speed boat races that happens each year there. And it's a huge thing, like the whole town. It's a historic little bucolic town. And everybody converges on this town for this event, and it's crazy. They rope off, or they don't rope off, but they close off a huge section of the Ohio River, and they have these several different categories of boats racing, and some of them are the fastest ones. I forgot what you call them. But anyway, they have all these great shows going on at the same time, and one of them's an air show where they had this stunt plane. It was a prop plane that was kind of a World War I looking prop plane that was doing stunts in the air. And I walked out of our house and caught it. We lived down the street from the river. You could literally walk out our front door and look down the street, and there's the Ohio River down at the bottom. I caught this show with this plane that was doing all these stunts. And this kind of inspired part of this poem. So it's called Stall Turn. Contrails slice its sky, where our grins cancel chagrin. Aerobatic planes trim wing, improvise comebacks. But the fuselage decomposes, splinters cloud blue as my hand on the knob closes off the framed breath, door jamb and door. But you already know, the evening faked its own atmosphere. No need then to say, I turn darkly into our dark. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you for participating and in the anthologies, and for, I love your work, and I'm so glad to have you here tonight. And Joshua also submitted some great photos of his cat on his typewriter, which we included actually in this last anthology. So which kind of
typewriter right behind me.
Yeah. It's those were some cool shots. So, and then and we hope to do more of that in this upcoming anthologies, to do more with illustrations, with photos, that kind of thing. So, and that kind of leads into Zoe Ramos, who submitted some visual poetry for this last anthology. If you could put it back on me for just a second. If somebody could remove this, there we go. So this is some of Zoe's visual poetry in the anthology, which I was very, very happy to see that. And if you had any comments or what your feelings are, and Zoe also submitted a tremendous video companion piece, which was used on the Corpus Christi Literary Reading Series. So what are your thoughts? Kind of a new direction. I know Joshua was involved with a lot of this kind of stuff too. So what are your thoughts, Zoe?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were still talking to Joshua there, but well, I appreciate you publishing that piece, because honestly, me as a visual or handwritten poet, you never know how a publisher is going to react. Are they just going to be like, what the hell is this? So you as a publisher accepting that work is really very valuable. It's very valuable that you have that point of view to be able to validate that style of handwritten poetry that, just getting back to what Javier was saying, I mean, poetry is constantly evolving. I mean, once we start to, delineate what poetry is into rules, into a rule-based system, that's when we start, going literally insane, which is, I mean, because you're always gonna, hit places where you think, well, we talked about writer's block yesterday, I think in a Q&A, and I think writer's block at a time can be, existential. I think it's really an existential problem. And I think it happens when you're trying too hard to sort of fit into somebody else's rule-based system. And so just kind of doing what you can do is really my message. And I wrote about that in Corpus Christi Writers, and how, handwritten poetry helped me to overcome not being able to write because of, being, schizophrenic and having to take different drugs that really messed with my creativity. But I think that's what I have to say. I really appreciate this discussion from everyone. It's been great.
Okay, thank you, Zoe. And I just want to reiterate how much I loved, in addition to publishing that visual poetry, was that video companion piece that you sent for the CCLRS, which is, I think that's up on our YouTube channel. If it's not, I'll double check, and I want to get it up there, because that was a great little video companion piece. So I guess this kind of closes out all the speakers, and we're going to go to a little roundtable. I did want to say that we're still accepting submissions for the upcoming anthology, and the deadline is March the 31st. And we hope that y'all all do submit. You can email me. You can go to my website, mayspublishing.com. I'm happy to talk to you about what your ideas are. We publish poetry, prose, fiction, nonfiction, visual poetry. We like short pieces primarily, but we're open to whatever you want to do. It's open to people from Corpus Christi and the surrounding areas, and to natives, which is loosely defined as people that grew up here, then went away to college and never came back. Some of those people kind of get in, and we're very open to that. If you're not from the Corpus Christi area, and I've gotten a lot of inquiries about that, if you want to look at our website, mayspublishing.com, we are developing this as an online literary magazine. I update it daily, and so we do get some pretty good traffic off that site, and we do think it has great potential as a marketing vehicle for writers. And again, you can be from anywhere. There are people in that anthology from all over the country. There's a woman from Mexico City who's in that anthology, in the website. I'm sorry, the website. So wherever you're from, even if if you're not from the area, we'd love to have your work on the website, mayspublishing.com. You can just look me up. I'm very open to talking to people about trying to promote literacy and developing a marketing vehicle, because that's kind of what I'm about, really, is to try to help people market their work, and in the process, maybe I sell some books too, because I'm a writer and my wife's a writer. So anyway, that's all I have. Are there did anyone have any thoughts about anything, or something maybe they wanted to talk about before we end the discussion?
I would like to just, because it sounds like we're going to be closing up here soon, I'd just like to thank everybody for participating and coming out to tonight's panel, to all the panels, and to everybody in the committee. There's been some great work. Karen did some great work on the website and things. Malia Pérez, Juan Pérez, Alan Berecka, Alice Berecka, Joshua Hamilton, Susan Wolf Murphy, and let's see, Chuck Etheridge, Dylan Lopez, Zoe Ramos. So I mean, and Robin Carstensen and Stefan Sensors. We had a huge committee this year, and I just want to make sure everybody gets a a little gratitude and thanks for that. And the support too, is I know he's here, but he's being quiet, but my boss is here. Thank you, Dr. Kevin Kincannon, Chair of the English Department. And also, and thank you, Bill, for all your support you've done with all the Zooms and setting that up. And we really appreciate that, and doing this panel too. Thank you.
It's been great fun, and thanks to everyone for participating. Did anyone else have any final thoughts? Alan?
Unmute yourself. Oh, something's not working.
I just want to say I miss you, Corpus Christi.
We miss you, Odelia. We miss you a lot.
you. Oh, we miss you, Odelia. Oh my gosh. Still
I have the
can't
same
hear you,
sentiment.
Alan.
I miss home.
So you're in
What
San
about
Antonio?
now?
Yes.
Now we got Alan now. I think.
Okay, Bill, thanks for doing all the stuff you're doing for riding in Corpus Christi. And the other person who hasn't gotten thanked is Tom Murphy. And so, Tom, thank you and congratulations once more. Everything
Thank
comes
you.
your way is really deserved.
Thank you. I forgot two people though, Javier Villarreal and Rossi de Lima. Lima de Padilla. Sorry, my bad. But thank you, and thank you. Alan.
Javier's coming over to your house to beat you up right now.
But yeah, but thank you, Bill. You've been just amazing too, because behind the scenes, Bill's done a lot of work, and like Karen and like Alice, all behind the scenes. There's been a lot of work going on there, and so really appreciate that.
It's been my pleasure to work with all of you.
This has been a great experience. Let's do it again next year.
You think?
Sounds good to me, actually. We're probably past COVID though, so maybe it's all going to be. Maybe it'll be different. I don't know.
We were actually talking earlier in some of the panels is maybe doing a hybrid, doing if we can in person and have some of it if we need to on Zoom or something like that. It's really, we really reached a lot of people. We've had people not only from reading from New York, from Michigan, from Ohio, but we've had people watching from California, all around the country and stuff. So I think it's something to think about when we're talking about next year. So.
That sounds good to me.
I vote for anywhere with a liquor license.
That's my daughter.
Here, 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 here.
We did have fun with those events too when we went
This
out.
was my first poetry fest, and I just wanted to say I really enjoyed listening to everyone. There's so much talent, beautiful writing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis. Thanks for supporting me. And that's all I have, folks. So see you next year, hopefully, or see you before then.
Hopefully.
Hey guys.
Yes.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, Robin.
Robin,
Bye-bye.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
Bye.